Good morning, everybody. It is an honor of mine to be with such fine people. In memory of Pastor Keith while he's gone, there's a photo of him. Just kidding. That's supposed to be Elijah and Moses, and we'll talk about them as we go on. When Pastor Keith asked me to preach, he actually said, Nano, you can preach on whatever you want. So it's like, Jesus used me to speak on something big that ends with an ology or an ation or one of these big words that'll make me look good. And I prayed for a few hours, and then he said, call. And I was like, one syllable, too. That's just lame. But anyway, with that, today we're going to talk about within the calling. But before we go with that, I love a little crowd interaction, and this is more serious than funny. But we're going to take a little census here, so be honest. And this is one of those times you can look around and judge other people as they raise their hands. So the first one is, who has had the most jobs? In my opinion, a job should last at least 1 year in this situation for you to qualify, count it as a job. Who's done one job in their life? That is me. Who's done 2 jobs in their life? I am eliminated. I've only done 1. 2 jobs? 3 jobs? Okay, that's a lot of people. 4, 5. Now we're getting into the older generations. 6. Man, Adrian's still in there. 7. Adrian? Wow. 8. Okay, we still have 9. Man, some of you guys do a lot of work. 10. Wow, we're going to count it there. 10 jobs. That's crazy. That's a lot of jobs. So this one hopefully will eliminate the people who won the last round. Who's had the same job for the longest amount of time? So anyone got 5 years? Just keep your hands up, and if you cross the number, you can take it down. So 5 years at one job. I am out of the first round. 10 years at one job. Okay, some faithful workers. 15. 20. How are Hans and Adrian still in this in both rounds? 25. Anyone done for 25? Is it just Dave? Oh, Dave and Manuel. 30. 30. Wow. 35. Oh my goodness. I am 22 years old. 40. Wow. Well, good job, guys. Thank you for working so hard. You can put your hands down. Man. And what we're going to talk about is how if you're going to do that many jobs or that long in your life, you better feel that God is calling you to do that. So here are 2 more questions where we get a little more serious, and I want you guys to be really honest, okay? Don't feel pressure to lift up your hands. So would you mind raising up your hands if you can say you feel like you are doing your job right now because God told you to do it? How many of you guys, and there's no shame if that's not the answer, but how many of you guys are doing it because God told you to do it? A good amount. You guys can put your hands down. How many of you feel like that you feel in your soul, in your heart, that God is still going to call you somewhere else after this, that there's potential, that this is not the end of the road? A lot of hands. I like that. Well, thank you, guys. So how many of you did not raise your hand for that first question, for if you feel like you are operating, like you're in your job because God told you so? How many people would raise your hand to that saying, I'm just in my job because that's where life has led me and I glorify God through it? A lot of people, some people. A lot of people didn't raise their hands up that first time. Anyway, so today this is something that I struggled with because one of my greatest fears as a teenager was that I was going to get 15, 20, 25, 30 years into my life, like some of the people who one job, and then find out that is not what God wanted me to do. That was like one of my biggest fears, that I'm going to live my whole life, and then someday I'm just going to know in my heart that I wasted my life and I did not do what God wanted me to do. And I'm not saying that that's anybody here. But today I want to talk exactly on that. So we're going to address 2 crowds today. The first one is those who are maybe confused about their life. That's where I was as a teenager. Maybe some high schoolers or maybe people just going into the job force who are confused about what they want to do with their life. And they're asking that question, God, what do you want me to do? And the second group I'm going to address is those who are content with their life, those are like, I know I'm pretty happy with my life, I'm settled down. So we're going to talk about that and how that interacts with calling. And today specifically, I want to talk about how everybody is included in the Christian call, but everybody also has a personal call. Thus, the amazing title, Within the Calling. So first, what is the Christian call? And there is Matthew 28, 19 through 20. This is Well, this isn't labeled the Christian call, but it's called the Great Commission. But anyway, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. So this is the call to every single person who claims to love Jesus, who claims to have Jesus as his Savior. Go, do some missions, reach people who do not know me, teach them about me, and change their lives. And I have one more verse that I've tagged on to this that I don't have on the screen, but Philippians 3:8 says, everything you do in your life is a waste if you do not love Jesus. So we're going to qualify that as the Christian call. You can leave that up there, a mix of letting people around you know about Jesus and you loving Jesus every day more with your life. I was listening to a sermon on calling the other day, and a pastor named Josiah Jones, I believe we'll find out from what church he is when the slide comes up. But Pastor Josiah Jones from Watermark Community Church said this: as long as you are drawing closer to Christ, there's no way you can be a failure at life. And that is basically what the Christian call is. As long as you are loving Jesus more and more every day, and as long as you are bringing other people to Jesus, it is impossible for you to be a failure at life. So for all those who may be confused right now about what you want God to do, remember that. As long as you are loving Jesus more and more every day, it's impossible to be a failure at life. So next we're going to go on, though, into the personal call of life, and how maybe it is a little different than just the plain Christian call. But first, a commercial break. Have you ever wondered if God cares what you have for breakfast in the morning? Does God have an opinion on whether you eat Cinnamon Toast Crunch or whether you eat Honey Nut Cheerios? Have you ever wondered that? God, what do you want me to eat this morning? Well, if you do not believe that there is a difference, there is a word for that. And that word is adiaphora. I Googled how to pronounce that right. I knew what the word meant, but that means adiaphora. The opinion that certain doctrines or practices in morals or religion are matters of indifference because they are neither commanded nor forbidden in the Bible. So adiaphora is this belief that you have eggs in the morning or you have Cinnamon Toast Crunch and you're like, the Bible doesn't tell me what to eat, so I can eat whatever I want. That's a very shallow example of it. There's a lot of actual real examples that we consider like gray area Christianity. But just keep this word in mind. Adiaphora is the belief that because it's not in the Bible, that God maybe does not have an opinion, or there's no morality or ethics to it. So with that in mind, we are going to go to the personal call. And I'm going to talk about two specific stories in the Bible that are examples of the personal call. The first one is when the Israelites are in Egypt, God is commanding them to build this giant tent, which we call the tabernacle. And he calls two specific guys. And I forgot their names, but God basically says to Moses, go get this guy and that guy, these two guys who I have anointed. They're the most skilled craftsmen around. Go and get them to work on the tabernacle. And those guys dedicated the next few years of their life to building this amazing tent with golden articles, and it's just gorgeous. Like it just makes you in more evidence of God. Now, if these people were to say that because they're doing the Christian call in life, because they are sharing the gospel with more people, which is good, because they're loving Jesus more and more every day, which is good, but if they said that's all I need, and I'm going to reject the personal call on my life, which is to commit my life to serve God through using my skills, it'd be hard. But that's an example of what personal call is. Sometimes we all have this general calling. The nation of Israel had this general calling, but God will call specific people out of that nation of Israel to do specific things. The next example I want to bring out is Jonah Chapter 1, verses 1 through 2. And this is what God says to Jonah. Up on your feet and on your way to the big city of Nineveh. Preach to them. They're in a bad way, and I can't ignore it any longer. Now, he didn't actually use that type of English. That's just what the Message uses. But anyway, so this is God's call to Jonah, a specific individual. Now, notice that God doesn't say the same, Great Commission language, go and baptize the nations in my name, teach people about me. But God has a specific mission for Jonah. He says, on your feet, on your way to the big city Nineveh. So he gives him a location. Go here. And he says, preach to them. He gives them a job. Preach. They're in a bad way, and I can't ignore it any longer. And God's heart in this is he wants Jonah to get up, to go to a specific place, preach to a specific people, and through that, God is going to bring salvation to these people. Now, this is an excellent, excellent example of what personal call can look like. When God says, up on your feet, go do this at this time. This is what I wished for my entire life. That one day I'd wake up, and God would say to me, Nano, today at 8:38 a.m., I want you to go to Walmart, and there's going to be a guy in a red hat and a yellow t-shirt, and you're going to go and preach the gospel to him. Now, I wish God did that to me. Because say I did go to Walmart, and I did see this yellow guy in the red shirt, I would probably share the gospel with him, because I'd be sure. I'd know that that's what God has called me to do. Now, some of you guys will say, as long as God calls me to South Side Walmart and not North Side Walmart. But wherever God calls you, you go, if you live in Rapid City. Anyway, but imagine a world where every single day you woke up and God told you, go at this time to this person and share the gospel in this way. I'd hope that most of us here would do that, right? Maybe the first day you'd be nervous, the second day you'd listen, the third day you'd see that the second day someone got saved, and this would be a lifestyle where every day you're sharing the gospel. Imagine if God did that with all 300, 400 people who attend Bethel regularly, and every day he gave them one specific mission to share the gospel. Within a year, we'd shared the gospel to over 120,000 people, which is over Rapid City, if God gave us this personal calling. But guess what? He does not, so we don't do it. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. How do we know the personal calling on our life from God? Because if we are not sure of the personal calling, we won't have this courage to go and share the gospel with that person in Walmart. We won't have the courage to go and do every day exactly what we need to do. We can so get into this diaphora mindset where we're like, it's not that in the Bible that I need to go share the gospel every day of my life, so I'm just going to do it once a year, and I'm fulfilling the Great Commission right there. In fact, the Bible actually, when talking about calling, it uses this beautiful language in 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 10. And he says, therefore, my brothers and sisters, make every effort to confirm your calling and election. For if you do these things, you will never stumble. So in this, Peter's saying, every single day, Christians, you wake up and do everything you can to confirm your calling, to make sure you are doing what God is asking you to do in your life. This isn't just a one and done, I know Jesus called me to be a pastor 20 years ago, so I'm still doing it. But this is every single day, make every single effort to do exactly what God wants you to do. So what I want to talk about is how there should be a kind of a tug of war where we're complacent in doing the Christian call, where our mindset is, I'm going to share the gospel, I'm going to reach new people, I'm going to love Jesus. But we're never forgetting that every single day we need to make every effort to increase the calling on our personal lives. God hasn't just called a church, he has called the individuals of the church. Each and every one of you, he has called for specific things. So here, now that I qualify myself as a smart person, I took the liberty to come up with my own definition. So here's Nano's definition of calling. It is to live in the tension of searching for calling and living out calling. Because if you search for calling your whole life, you're never going to do anything. And if you think you're living out calling and you fail to actually search for what God wants you to do, you're not actually living out calling. It's a weird play on words there. But just imagine, what would happen if you found your personal calling the way Jonah did? How courageous would you be? If you know exactly what God wanted you to do, you would do it every single day. But because we don't know that some days, we fail to do it. And that includes me. I knew that God has called me to ministry. I've known that my whole life. And here I am. I've just completed my first year of ministry. And to be honest, a lot of the days along the road, I've come and I've taken attendance and I've texted a few people without actually asking, God, what do you want me to do today? Who do you want me to reach out to today? So we're going to look at the lives of Elijah and Moses to apply this into our own life. And the first point we're going to talk about is seeking the calling of your life. And this is to those who maybe feel confused or do not exactly know what God is calling you to do in life. And we're going to go on the story of Elijah for this. Now, if you don't know Elijah, a quick background. He was a prophet who thought he was doing what God wanted him to do. And he did this for months. He did many miracles. But one day, it clicked in his mind. He's like, I've done so many miracles and I have not seen results. I've been working so hard every day of my life, and I've not seen the same amount of people come to know God that I thought I would. And in fact, back then, Queen Jezebel was her name. The queen wanted to kill Elijah. So Elijah, who was called to be this prophet, began to see the lack of results, began to see the lack of the voice of God in his life, and saw how people did not like him. And because of that, he lost his calling. He lost his calling. And many of us can be in that boat today where we've been doing something every single day for many years and we have not seen results. We've tried to be nice to our neighbors and they still are no more like Jesus than they were when we met them. And we want to give up and say, maybe this is not the calling on my life, just like Elijah did. So Elijah gets scared. He doesn't know what God has called him to do, and he runs away to this forest. And that's where I want to talk about the first point. And the point one under seeking your calling is get into the cave. That's pretty cool. I came up with that title myself. Get into the cave. And I think that the Bible uses language not on accident. Because if you think of caves, they're not a place where there's an endless party. They're not a place where there's typically a Bible or angel choirs. It's a place of darkness and loneliness and cold and disgusting. And it doesn't sound like a fun place. There's not many people who enjoy living in caves. But here we see in Elijah, what he does when he is most sad is that Elijah goes into a cave. And what I want to encourage those who are maybe seeking their calling to today is just like Elijah goes into that place of loneliness where there's nobody else. If you feel like that, don't be afraid. Don't feel like it's sinful to be confused. Don't feel like it's sinful to be lonely. Embrace that. Don't go into a depression saying, oh, woe is me. But also say, God, right now I come to you and I have no idea what to do with my life. I literally can't decide it on my own. I feel like a failure. And those things are good to tell God. So the first point is get into that cave. Get into that place of where you do feel alone so that you can actually speak to God for real. Because we see in the cave, Elijah's only desire is to hear God's voice. He actually sees fire and he's like, Jesus, is that you? And it wasn't God. Well, Jesus wasn't born yet, so it was Yahweh, is that you? But then he hears this loud wind and Elijah's like, God, is that you? And there was no response. Then he hears this lightning and thunder, and he's like, God, is that you? There was no response. But finally, God speaks to Elijah and says, hey, Elijah. And how many of us need to hear that today? Sometimes we want to hear this cool fire and lightning and thunder thing. We think that's what God is, but the truth is we don't need to seek these random symbols for God. He literally just speaks to you. He knows your name. But anyway, God comes to Elijah and he says, Elijah, what are you doing? And this is where I want to bring up the second point, which is live with fearlessness. In this story, we see that Elijah goes to that place of loneliness where he can seek God. He hears God's voice. But here's what happens. Here's what I love. We know from the story that Elijah was confused. We know that he was alone. We know that people wanted to kill him. But even though that was his internal feelings, look what he was doing with his life while he felt like that. God comes to Elijah in the cave and he says, Elijah, what are you doing here? And Elijah says, instead of Elijah saying, God, I'm lonely, poor me, you don't even speak to me. Instead of throwing a woe is me party when God speaks to him and says, what are you doing? Elijah says, God, I've been depressed and I've been hurt, but even through that, Elijah's response is, I've zealously been living for you. I've been doing everything I thought you wanted me to do. So if you are in that boat of where you feel that Elijah-ness on you, where you're confused and alone maybe, when God asks you, what are you doing with your life right now? Let your answer not be, I am throwing a pity party, but let your answer be, even though I'm alone, even though I'm confused and I don't know what you want me to do with life, I've still been living zealously for you. I've still been searching through your word. I've still been loving my fellow church people and those around me. God, even though I don't know what I'm doing, I do everything I do for you. And this is where we need to grasp the importance of the Christian call. Because when we don't know that personal call on your life in that exact moment, that Christian call is always there. You will always have to love Jesus more yesterday than today than yesterday. Whoops. You will always have to go share the gospel with other people. So someday when you go to Jesus, you go to God and you're like, God, I don't know what my next steps are. And he says, what have you been doing? Let your answer not be, I've been doing nothing, but let it be, even as I seek for you, I'm continuing to act. And we see that after this motion, Elijah actually goes and he calls out politicians. He gets in like squabbles with great kings. After this moment of confusion, he goes and lives a life fearlessly. So if you don't know what to do with your life right now, first of all, don't be scared to take time to go and hear God's voice, but also live fearlessly. Don't let the sense of lack of purpose in your life keep you from what God has created you to do. The second story we're going to go through is the story of Moses, and that is the continual pursuit of God. Now, for those who don't know the story of Moses, Moses was actually the adopted grandson of Pharaoh, who was the king of Egypt. So culturally, Moses was kind of like this Egyptian prince, you could say. I think there's a movie called Prince of Egypt. There is. Anyway, sorry guys. Where was I? Anyway, so Moses was this adopted grandson of Pharaoh, but he knew that he was a Hebrew, like he was an Israelite. By blood, he was an Israelite. So one day he's walking down the road and he sees this Egyptian slave, driver just beating up this Hebrew, and Moses gets super mad and he murders the Egyptian. And he gets so scared that his adopted grandpa Pharaoh is going to kill him as punishment that he runs away. But I don't want to talk about Moses' past. I want to talk about what happened after he ran away. So Moses ran away to this desert, to this like desert people, to this small town. And actually, he begins to live the good life. He goes and like a good young strapping man saves multiple women from these mean shepherds trying to tease them and stuff. And Moses is like the hero of the story. And actually, Moses makes a lot of friends in his new town. So much that he finds this lady who he really likes, and turns out he meets her dad, and her dad likes Moses. So then he ends up getting married. He's living the good life. And the Bible actually says in Exodus chapter 2:21, it says, and Moses was content to dwell with the man. The man was his father-in-law. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. And you can leave that right there. In this story, Moses went from this scary Egyptian place to a place where he found peace, to a place where he was happy, to a place where he probably felt that he was in the call of God. He sounds like he found a wonderful father-in-law. He found a wife. A lot of people want that in life. And I think he even had kids too. But I want to focus on this word, and Moses was content. How amazing is that? How many of us want to just feel content with life, where we're doing a job we love, in a place we love, with people we love? That's what life is all about, so we think, right? But actually, right after this verse where it says, and Moses was content, the following section says, even though Moses was content, God saw the pain and the hurt of other people. So if you are in an area of contentment right now, maybe some of that is God's blessing, but while we may feel content and happy that we are living life, God is not looking just at us, but he is looking at the hurting and the people in pain around us. So if you're in an area of content in your life, we're going to learn some dangerous things that God may call you to. And the first slide is, turn aside to the curiosity of life. And so Moses was a shepherd, and one day, like most shepherds do, he was like taking care of his sheep and enjoying life. Sounds kind of peaceful. Imagine a sunny day with a beautiful green hill and just the little sheeps, jumping around, frolicking in the meadows. What a beautiful life. Moses was content. But one of these days, while he was working, while he was living, he wasn't seeking God. He wasn't reading, I don't know what you'd read back then. He wrote the Torah. So he wasn't thinking of anything. But he was just loving life, And all of a sudden he sees this bush on fire. And the Bible says, and Moses turned aside to the bush. And he walks up to this bush. And God says, Moses. And just like we sang in that song, Moses says, here I am. And God uses that moment to transform Moses' content life into one of the worst, most difficult lives possible. God takes Moses from this wonderful shepherd watching frolicking sheep in the meadow with his wife to being the main leader of the entire Israelite nation outside of captivity. If we refuse to turn aside to the call of God in our life, to that little fiery bush, even while we're working, even while we're enjoying life, we may not only miss out on the opportunity to hear God's voice, but God may have wonderful, big plans for you. But if you focus on your contentment and say, oh my goodness, that fiery bush looks a quarter mile away, I'll just watch my sheep, you're going to miss out on the calling of God in your life. So the first point is, turn aside to the curiosity of life. God has created each and every one of you with specific interests for a reason. When you come to church on a Sunday morning, is seeing a new family alone in the corner bug you? First impressions team, I hope it does bug you. But if that bugs you, you should do something about it. Turn aside to that curiosity of life. While you're driving and you see like a homeless person like passed out or something, or if you see someone who's asking for money, does that bug you? Or are you content like Moses? But what I want to say is not that you guys should be bugged by each and every bad thing that goes on in the world. But what I say is that if there are specific things that tugs your heart, that bugs you, whether that's people being treated unjustly, or if it bugs you that the carpet is not vacuumed well enough, turn aside and vacuum the carpet. But, oh wow. Not trying to go on an rant here. But what I'm trying to say is, don't miss out on those opportunities. Just turn aside to those fires, to those little things where God is trying to call you in life. And just like Moses, he was not playing. You may not be playing when God speaks to you. Someday you may just be going along with your daily life and you'll see something and you just feel that tug on your heart. That is the voice of God. And the second and last point for today is live with signs and wonders. So after Moses goes to the fire, God calls Moses to flee his people, and Moses is scared. So God gives Moses some magic tricks. That sounds bad. Some miracles. God gave Moses some miracles where like he can put his hand in his shirt, and when he takes it out, it's like a leper's hand, and it's disgusting. And Moses can throw his rod on the floor, and it becomes a snake. God gives Moses these signs and wonders. And Moses did them, and he thought they were super cool in the presence of God. While he saw God right next to him, he loved these signs and wonders. But God said, go do these amongst people who don't know me. And Moses was like, whoa, I can't do that. I'm going to do all these miracles, all these signs and wonders when I know I'm in a safe place, but I'm not going to go do them when I feel like I'm in danger. So if you feel that calling on your God, if you come here on a prayer and worship night and you know that God has given you the gift of speaking in tongues or the gift of healing, if you have prayed for someone on a prayer and worship night, and they've been healed, and then you go, and it's Tuesday afternoon at work, and someone broke their arm, and you don't pray for them, maybe it's useless that you pray for people on Sunday, because you're doing stuff only in the presence of God, and not in the presence of the people that God has called you to reach. Now, I think that just as God blessed Moses with these signs in his presence, God will bless you guys with signs and wonders and gifts in his presence. But there's no point in us having signs and wonders and gifts of being encouraging and loving, and we can heal people and we can pray for people and we can anoint people with oil. But if we're too scared to do that in the presence of those who need him, just like Moses was, there's no point in God giving us those signs and wonders. What you do on Sunday should be a representation of what you do the rest of the week. That's what makes Sundays fun, because we get to go and show off our holiness with our brethren. Sorry. But anyway, whatever God has given on your heart, if God has given you passions, turn aside to those passions. If God has given you powers, turn aside to those powers. But also use them in your daily life as you find your call. I want to bring up a side-by-side comparison of Elijah and Moses right now. And you'll see that Elijah was confused. He didn't know what to do. He felt alone. But he sought God. And then he sought God by embracing that loneliness and admitting that he was scared and confused. And then we see that God commands Elijah to do certain things, and Elijah goes and lives a life with fearlessness. So if you're here right now this morning and you don't know what the purpose of your life is, you don't know what your calling is, be like Elijah. Go to that place where you're alone, where you hear God's voice, while always living a life of fearlessness. Don't let the fact that you don't feel like you have a holy calling keep you from living the amazing life that God has called you to live. And second, we look at the life of Moses. Moses was content, which, to be honest, I'm pretty content with life right now. And you may be too. Moses was content, but God called Moses to turn aside to what God was calling him. If you're in that place where you're happy being a shepherd and if you're happy, God is still looking at the people in pain who don't know his name. And that's what he wants you to do. And we see that God commands Moses to go live a life of signs and wonders. So if God has given you signs and wonders as part of your personal calling and your personal gifts, use them. Use them during the week. Don't be scared. Use them to be a blessing to people. I'd like to close with this story about my grandma. I love my grandma. She's a nice lady. But my grandma's, I think, in her low to mid 80s. And my grandma and grandpa lived pretty good lives. My grandpa was a pastor for 50 years. Nuts. My grandpa was a pastor for 50 years. And my grandma was a school principal for like 20, 30 years. You know, not that that's the only life of calling, but that is a life of calling. They did amazing things together. That's like a life that many people strive to live, of consistency and doing one thing for a long time. But anyway, about 5 or 6 years ago, my grandpa passed away. And at this moment, my grandma was put in a position of both Elijah and Moses. She was in confusion after losing her life partner of about 55, 56 years. She was in confusion and fear and loneliness. But she was also like Moses, where she was content. At her stage in life, she really didn't have many things in her bucket list that she hadn't done, you know? She has wonderful grandchildren, wonderful children. So she's in a mix of confusion and contentment. And in that moment, my grandma decided, she's like, how can I still be useful to this world? How can I still find my calling? And at the age of like 82, 83, she decided to send out a weekly Grandma's Life newsletter to the whole family. And she sends it. And it's really grandma stuff. I watered the lilies today. I did this. I looked at the golf cart, but I couldn't fix it. Oh, I forgot to cook dinner. It's really grandma stuff. But at the end of every single thing, she puts this verse that has impacted me personally. Psalm 92, verse 14. They will still bear fruit in old age, and they will stay fresh and green. Now, this is cute if you think you're an old person, I guess, but this isn't just to my grandma that they will still bear fruit. If you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, God is calling you, search for new ways to pursue your calling. Bear fruit. If you're 15, 17, 18, 20 years old and you don't know what to do, God is calling you, bear fruit right now. Search for your calling. So as we end this service, I'd like to just take, before we close it and stuff, I'd like to just take about 2 or 3 minutes right now. No point in listening to this if we're not going to act on it. So right now, using these points, are you confused or are you content? Right now, for 2 or 3 minutes, let's take a few minutes to ask God, God, what is your personal call on my life for today and the next coming days? And continue to work out your calling with excellence.